I was born into what you might call an ordinary family: mom, dad, and eventually, my younger sister Sarah. We lived in a modest two-story house in a quiet neighborhood, nothing special really. But looking back now, I can see that's where any sense of ordinary ended for me. From the moment Sarah was born, 3 years after me, our family dynamic shifted. She was a sickly baby, always catching one thing or another. Colds turned into bronchitis, ear infections became chronic, and mysterious fevers would appear out of nowhere. I remember standing on my tiptoes by her crib, watching Mom and Dad hover over her with worried faces, checking her temperature for the 100th time that day. The irony was, I never caught anything. While Sarah seemed to attract every illness floating around, I remained stubbornly, persistently healthy. Not a sniffle, not a cough, not even a skinned knee that needed more than a band-aid. You'd think parents would be thrilled to have such a healthy child, but in our house, my good health became almost an inconvenience. I was 7 when I first wished I would get sick. I remember lying in bed one night, praying for a fever or a bad cough, anything that would make Mom stroke my hair and Dad read me stories the way they did for Sarah. I even tried faking a stomachache once, but Mom just took one look at me and said, "You're fine, Gloria. Now go help me with the dishes." As we grew into our teenage years, the pattern only became more pronounced. Sarah, at 11, spent most of her time resting on the couch or in her room, while I, at 14, became practically our house's maintenance staff. It started with regular cleaning, but over time, Mom's concerns about germs turned into a full-blown obsession. Every surface had to be sanitized multiple times a day. The floors needed mopping at least 3 times, sometimes more if someone had walked through with shoes on. God forbid a speck of dust settle anywhere near precious Sarah. "But Mom, I just cleaned everything an hour ago," I'd protest, staring at the already spotless floor. "Don't argue with me, Gloria," she'd snap, thrusting the mop into my hands. "Do you want your sister to get sick? Do you want her back in the hospital?" That became her go-to weapon, guilt. Any resistance on my part was painted as a direct attack on Sarah's health. Meanwhile, Sarah would watch TV or read magazines, occasionally throwing me a sympathetic look but never offering to help. Why would she? She was the sick one, after all. The cleaning routine became almost ritualistic. Morning, sweep, mop, dust. Afternoon, repeat. Evening, repeat again. Mom would inspect everything with the intensity of a military sergeant, finding invisible specks of dust and demanding I redo entire rooms. The smell of bleach and disinfectant became so constant that I stopped noticing it, just like I stopped noticing the ache in my arms from all the scrubbing. The constant cleaning and caretaking was wearing me down. Between school, housework, and trying to maintain some semblance of a normal teenage life, I felt like I was drowning. That's when I spotted the help wanted sign in the window of Miller's Diner, just 3 blocks from our house. "I want to work there," I announced at dinner that night, watching Mom cut Sarah's meat into tiny pieces even though she was perfectly capable of doing it herself. "I'm 16 now." "A diner?" Mom's nose wrinkled. "Gloria, do you know how many germs?" To my surprise, Dad spoke up. "Let her try it, Helen. It might be good for her to have some responsibility." I nearly laughed at that, as if I hadn't been shouldering responsibility since I was 7. But I kept quiet, not wanting to jeopardize this unexpected support. The diner became my sanctuary. Sure, the work was hard, carrying plates, dealing with grumpy customers, cleaning tables, but it was different from the endless cleaning at home. Here, I was valued. Mrs. Miller, the owner, actually thanked me for my work. Customers left tips with genuine smiles. For 4 hours every afternoon, I wasn't just Sarah's sister or the healthy one, I was just Gloria, the reliable waitress who remembered their coffee orders. Every penny I earned went straight into my secret savings account. When Mom asked about my paychecks, I'd shrug and say I was buying school supplies or new clothes. She never questioned it. As long as they didn't have to spend money on me, they were happy. But the diner was just part of my escape plan. During the day, I threw myself into my studies with the same determination I'd once put into cleaning our house. I joined every academic club I could, entered every competition, and signed up for all the advanced placement classes our school offered. Gloria Martinez, my chemistry teacher, announced one day, perfect score on the state science Olympiad. Again. My classmates clapped, but I was already thinking about how this would look on my college applications. I needed a full-ride scholarship, my future depended on it. The day I got my acceptance letter from State University, complete with a full academic scholarship, I wasn't even surprised. I'd worked too hard for any other outcome. But I waited to tell my parents, knowing what was coming. Sure enough, a week later, Mom and Dad sat me down at the kitchen table. Sarah lingered in the doorway, pretending not to listen. "Gloria," Mom began, her voice heavy with practiced martyrdom, "we need to talk about college. With all of Sarah's medical bills. We just can't afford to help with your tuition," Dad finished, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "The treatments have taken everything we—" "I got a full scholarship," I interrupted, pulling out my acceptance letter. "Everything's covered, tuition, room and board, even books. You won't have to pay anything." The relief on their faces should have hurt, but I was past that. What I didn't expect was the flash of envy that crossed Sarah's face as she skulked away from the doorway. State University was 800 miles from home, and honestly, that wasn't far enough. My dorm room was tiny, with mint green walls and a squeaky bed, but it was mine. No cleaning schedules, no guilt trips, no constant reminders of Sarah's needs. I declared my major in business management right away. I figured if I could handle entitled customers and daily totals at a diner, I could handle anything the business world threw at me. "We'll try to send you some money when we can," Mom had said during our weekly phone call. "But Sarah's new treatment is very expensive, and—" "It's fine," I cut her off, already knowing the script. I found a job at the campus cafe. The cafe job wasn't bad. I worked between classes and some weekends, serving overpriced lattes to sleep-deprived students and professors. The tips weren't as good as the diner, but the flexible schedule made up for it. Plus, they let us drink the mess-up drinks for free, which saved me plenty on caffeine. Sometimes I called my parents. Every conversation followed the same pattern. Mom would list Sarah's latest health issues, Dad would mumble something about bills, and they'd both find ways to mention how expensive everything was. I'd learned to keep my responses short and change the subject quickly. I only went home for major holidays. Sarah would usually be there, looking less sickly each time, but still playing the role of the delicate flower. Then came the news that Sarah had graduated high school. I wasn't able to attend the ceremony, or at least, that's what I told them. Finals were a convenient excuse. "We're so proud," Mom gushed during our next call. "She's going to attend Madison College. Their medical program is excellent, and they have a wonderful student health center." I gripped my phone tighter. "That's great. How's she paying for it?" There was a slight pause. "Oh, we've been saving." The irony hit me like a slap. After years of "we spent everything on Sarah's treatments and we just can't afford college right now," they'd somehow managed to find enough money to send her to a private college. I thought about my own scholarship applications, the countless nights spent perfecting essays while also maintaining my grades and working at the diner. "That's wonderful," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I'm happy for her." "We just want what's best for her health," Mom added, as if I might have forgotten their eternal justification. After hanging up, I sat on my bed and let out a long breath. The familiar bitter taste in my mouth wasn't exactly anger anymore, it was more like validation. Every scholarship I'd earned, every extra shift I'd worked, every penny I'd saved had been the right choice. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at Bennett & Associates, a mid-sized consulting firm. The starting salary wasn't impressive, but I saw potential. While other new hires complained about long hours and tedious tasks, I threw myself into every project. "Martinez," my supervisor called out one Friday afternoon, "that efficiency protocol you suggested for the Thompson account? The CEO loved it. Keep this up, and you're going places." I did keep it up. Every project, every presentation, every client meeting became an opportunity to prove myself. I developed a reputation for innovative solutions and attention to detail. When I proposed a new customer relationship management system that saved the company thousands, the senior partners took notice. The promotions came steadily after that. Junior analyst to senior analyst. Senior analyst to project manager. Each step up meant more responsibility, more respect, and yes, more money. I moved from my cramped studio to a decent one-bedroom apartment, bought some proper furniture, started building an emergency fund that had nothing to do with escaping my family. "Your quarterly numbers are exceptional," Mr. Bennett himself told me during my third-year review. "How would you feel about heading up our new digital transformation division?" I was 30, making six figures, and finally feeling like I'd built something solid for myself when the call came. "Gloria, honey." Mom's voice had that forced cheerfulness I remembered so well. "You must come visit this weekend. This is important family news. Sarah will be so disappointed if you're not here." Some things never change. I rearranged my schedule, delegated some tasks to my team, and booked a flight home. The house looked exactly the same when I arrived, maybe a few more cleaning supplies by the door, but otherwise unchanged. Sarah's car was in the driveway, along with an unfamiliar blue sedan. Mom opened the door before I could knock. "Gloria, come in, come in. Everyone's in the living room." Sarah was perched on the couch next to a tall man with glasses and a nervous smile. Dad sat in his usual armchair, and Mom quickly reclaimed her spot next to Sarah. "Gloria," Sarah beamed, "this is David, my fiancé. We're getting married." Sarah continued, holding up her left hand to display a sizable diamond ring. "The engagement party is in 2 weeks. You'll come, right?" I managed a smile and appropriate congratulatory noises. David seemed nice. But something felt off. Throughout dinner, the conversation kept circling back to my career. Mom, Dad, even Sarah couldn't stop asking questions. "So what exactly is your title now?" Mom pressed. "And you manage how many people?" Dad wanted to know. "Digital transformation, that sounds impressive," Sarah mused. "Must pay well?" I answered each question vaguely, years of practice helping me deflect their increasingly pointed inquiries about my finances. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this sudden interest in my career success wasn't just casual conversation. 2 weeks flew by in a blur of work deadlines and project meetings. Before I knew it, I was back in my hometown, pulling up to the Grand Plaza, easily the most expensive restaurant in the city. Sarah waved to me from the entrance, wearing a designer dress I knew she couldn't afford on her entry-level nurse's salary. David stood beside her, looking uncomfortable in his new suit. The private dining room was packed with faces I barely recognized, distant relatives, old family friends, what seemed like David's entire extended family. Crystal glasses clinked, waiters glided between tables with bottles of champagne, and elaborate flower arrangements centered each table. The evening progressed through course after expensive course. Imported caviar, Wagyu beef, vintage wines. I couldn't help doing the mental math, this had to be running into the thousands. On my last visit, Sarah had mentioned struggling to make her student loan payments, and I knew David worked at a local library. The numbers weren't adding up. "Another bottle of champagne for table 3. Sarah called out to a passing waiter, not even glancing at the wine list. She caught my eye and smiled. "We have to celebrate properly, right?" Finally, as the dessert plates were being cleared and guests were starting to gather their things, the restaurant manager approached our table. He was carrying a leather folder. "The evening's final bill," he announced, looking expectantly at the group. Before anyone else could move, Sarah gave an airy wave. "Oh, my sister Gloria will take care of that." She smiled at me with artificial sweetness. "She's very successful, you know, a big executive in the city." The manager turned to me and extended the folder. I took it, opened it, and felt my blood run cold. The number at the bottom had far more zeros than I'd expected, even with my worst-case calculations. I looked up to find every eye at the table on me. Mom and Dad wore identical expressions of studied nonchalance, as if this had been the plan all along. David looked mortified, but said nothing. And Sarah? Sarah was smirking, actually smirking, like she'd just pulled off some clever trick. They'd planned this. All of it, the excessive menu choices, the premium wines, the endless appetizers. The constant questions about my job and salary during their surprise announcement. They'd set me up, assuming I wouldn't dare cause a scene at my sister's engagement party. I closed the bill folder and stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. The restaurant had grown quieter, other guests sensing the tension at our table. "I'm not paying this bill," I said, my voice steady. "This is the first I'm hearing about any of this." Sarah's face contorted. "What do you mean you're not paying?" "Of course you're paying. You're my sister." "Gloria," Mom hissed, "don't make a scene." David's parents exchanged alarmed looks. His mother leaned forward. "I'm sorry, what's happening?" "We thought the bill had been arranged." "Nothing was arranged," I said, looking directly at Sarah. "They just assumed I'd pay without asking me." Sarah shot up from her chair, face red. "You selfish bitch. You make all that money and you can't even help your own sister? What kind of person are you?" "Sarah, honey, please calm down," David tried to intervene, reaching for her arm. She yanked away from him. "Don't tell me to calm down. She's ruining everything. She's always been jealous of me." The scene devolved quickly. Sarah grabbed a wine glass and hurled it against the wall. Then a plate, then another. Crystal shattered, guests gasped, and David's parents stood up, horrified. David tried again to calm her, but she shoved him so hard he stumbled backward into a waiter. I didn't stay to watch the rest. I grabbed my purse, walked out of the restaurant, and drove straight to the airport. I booked the first flight home while sitting in the terminal, my hands shaking not from fear or anger, but from a strange sense of relief. The mask had finally dropped. They couldn't pretend anymore. My phone started ringing at 7 a.m. the next morning. Mom's number. "How dare you," she screeched, before I could even say hello. "You've ruined everything." Sarah is devastated. "The engagement is probably off now, and it's all your fault." "My fault?" I let out a harsh laugh. "You tried to scam me." "Scam you? We're family. You make more than enough money to help your sister have her special day. You're just being selfish, like always." Dad's voice cut in, they had me on speaker. "You humiliated us in front of everyone. You need to make this right." "Make it right?" I repeated. "You mean pay for the bill you tried to trick me into covering?" "Well, yes," Mom said, as if it was obvious. "And since you've caused all this trouble, you should pay for the wedding too. The venue Sarah wants is $40,000, and that would be a good way to apologize." I couldn't help it. I started laughing. Not polite laughter, but deep, borderline hysterical laughter. "Let me be very clear," I said when I could speak again. "I'm not paying for the engagement dinner. I'm not paying for the wedding. I'm not paying for anything. And please, don't call me again." I hung up, blocked their numbers, and went to make coffee. I had a meeting in 2 hours, and I wasn't going to let their drama derail my life anymore. A week after the restaurant disaster, I was scrolling through Facebook during my lunch break when I saw it. David's relationship status had changed to single. A few clicks revealed that Sarah had removed all their photos together. The engagement was off. I wasn't surprised. After watching Sarah's meltdown, any sane person would run for the hills. What did surprise me was the post that appeared on my feed later that evening, written by my mother and shared by what seemed like every relative we had. "With heavy hearts, we must announce that Sarah's engagement has ended. While we usually keep family matters private, we feel we must speak out about the cruel and deliberate actions that led to this heartbreak. Our eldest daughter, Gloria, had promised to help with the engagement celebration and wedding costs, knowing how much this meant to her sister. But at the engagement dinner, she purposely humiliated Sarah in front of both families by refusing to pay the bill she had agreed to cover. This calculated act of sabotage came from a place of long-time jealousy and resentment. We have always known that Gloria envied the attention Sarah needed due to her health issues, but we never imagined she would stoop so low as to deliberately ruin her sister's happiness. Sarah is devastated, and David's family was so shocked by the scene that they encouraged him to reconsider the marriage. Our family is torn apart because one person chose spite over sisterly love. To those who wonder why we're sharing this publicly, we believe it's important to stand up to toxic behavior, even from family members. Especially from family members. The comments poured in like poison. I always knew there was something off about Gloria. So cold and distant at family gatherings. Poor Sarah. She's been through so much already with her health issues, and now this betrayal from her own sister. How could anyone be so heartless? Family should support each other. Aunt Margaret, who hadn't spoken to me in years, chimed in, "Helen, I'm so sorry your daughter turned out this way. You and Richard were such wonderful parents to both girls. Some people are just born selfish." Cousin Rachel, who'd attended the engagement, I was there. Gloria just walked out while Sarah was crying. She didn't even try to explain or apologize. Shocking behavior. Even distant relatives I barely remembered were joining the pile-on, each comment more viciously righteous than the last. Not one person questioned my parents' version of events. Not one person wondered why I might have refused to pay. Not one person reached out to hear my side. The narrative was set. I was the villain who destroyed my sister's happiness out of jealousy. The successful but bitter older sister who couldn't stand to see her younger sibling happy. The cold-hearted career woman who chose money over family. I began typing. I've never been one to air family drama publicly, but since my parents have chosen to share their version of events, I feel compelled to share the truth. No, I never promised to pay for Sarah's engagement dinner or wedding. In fact, I knew nothing about these supposed obligations until the restaurant bill was handed to me at the end of the evening. The truth is simple. My parents and sister orchestrated an elaborate dinner at one of the most expensive restaurants in town, invited 50 guests, ordered premium everything, and then expected me to cover the massive bill without any prior discussion or agreement. When I refused to pay for this surprise expense, Sarah had a meltdown that included throwing and breaking restaurant property. I left to avoid escalating the situation. The next morning, my parents called to berate me. They demanded I pay not only for the engagement dinner but also for a $40,000 wedding. They never denied planning this ambush. In fact, they defended it by saying I'd make enough money to cover these expenses. Don't take my word for it. Listen for yourselves. I attached the audio file. I'd recorded that morning's phone call out of pure instinct, thank goodness. Their voices rang out clear and damning. "Mom, you make more than enough money to help your sister have her special day. Dad, you need to make this right. Me, you mean pay for the bill you tried to trick me into covering? Mom, well, yes. And since you've caused all this trouble, you should pay for the wedding too. The venue Sarah wants is $40,000. The comments started immediately, but these were different. Oh my God, Gloria, I am so sorry for assuming the worst. I can't believe they tried to stick you with a bill like that without warning. Who does that? Helen and Richard, you should be ashamed of yourselves. This is exploitation, not parenting. Aunt Margaret, Gloria, honey, I owe you the biggest apology. I should have known there was more to this story. Cousin Rachel, I was at that dinner and I knew something felt off about the whole thing. I should have spoken up sooner. I'm so sorry, Gloria. Even some of David's family members commented, saying they'd had concerns about Sarah's behavior and stability, and that the broken engagement had more to do with her actions than anything I'd done. My parents tried damage control, claiming the recording was taken out of context, but it was too late. The truth was out. I didn't stick around to watch the fallout. I blocked my parents' numbers, blocked them and Sarah on all social media, and deleted the Facebook app from my phone. Enough was enough. That was 6 months ago. I haven't spoken to any of them since. Sometimes I get messages from relatives passing along news. Sarah's seeing a therapist now. Mom and Dad are in family counseling, but I don't respond. Maybe someday they'll understand the damage they've done, but I'm not holding my breath. For now, I'm focused on my life, my career, and the family I've chosen, friends who support me without trying to exploit me. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel guilty about putting myself first. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away. Even from family. Especially from family. Growing up as the second daughter in the Wilson family meant living in Jessica's shadow. She was 5 years older, and according to our parents, she was perfect in every way. I learned this lesson early, and it was reinforced daily in ways both big and small. When I was 6, I got an A on my math test and ran home excited to show Mom and Dad. They were in the kitchen, fawning over Jessica's new dance routine. "That's nice, honey," Mom said without even looking at my paper. "But look at your sister's pirouette." I stood there holding my test until the paper went limp in my hands, then quietly headed to my room. The pattern never changed. Jessica got new clothes from the mall while I got her hand-me-downs. When she wanted a phone at 12, they bought her the latest iPhone. When I turned 12, I got Jessica's old flip phone, and was told to be grateful. "Your sister is going places," Dad would say whenever I dared to complain. "She needs these things for her future." Apparently, my future didn't need much investment. Our paternal grandparents, who lived in the fancy part of town with their swimming pool and perfectly manicured lawn, were cut from the same cloth. Every time we visited, Grandma Margaret would greet Jessica with enormous hugs and excited squeals, while I got a distracted pat on the head. "Oh, Robin," she'd say, like she'd just remembered I existed. "You've grown." The Christmas I was 8 really drove it home. Jessica unwrapped a brand new laptop for her schoolwork. I got a pack of notebooks and some pencils. "We're being practical," Grandpa Richard explained with that condescending smile of his. "This is more your speed, isn't it?" But I had my own sanctuary, my mother's parents' house. Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George lived in a modest ranch-style home on the other side of town. There, something magical happened. I was treated like I mattered. They'd actually listen when I talked. They hung my artwork on their fridge right next to Jessica's. They remembered my favorite foods and made them when I visited. Jessica hated going there. "It's so boring," she'd complain. "They don't even have a pool, and Grandma Eleanor never lets me choose what we watch on TV." So she stopped visiting, which meant I got them all to myself. While our parents were busy shuttling Jessica to her endless parade of activities, ballet 1 month, horse riding the next, then violin lessons she'd quit after 3 weeks, I spent my afternoons at Eleanor and George's. They taught me to bake cookies, helped me with homework, and never once compared me to my sister. I was 10 when my parents delivered the final verdict on my worth to the family. It came during what they called a family meeting, though it felt more like a trial where the sentence had been decided long before the proceedings began. It was a Sunday afternoon in October. All 6 adults arranged themselves around our living room, Mom and Dad standing by the fireplace, both sets of grandparents on the matching sofas, and Jessica and me perched on chairs brought in from the dining room. The atmosphere was heavy with manufactured importance. "We need to discuss something serious," Dad began, his hands clasped behind his back like a businessman about to announce layoffs. "As you know, college education isn't getting any cheaper." I watched Jessica straighten up in her chair, smoothing her perfect blonde hair. At 15, she was already practicing her future college student pose. I sat still, my hands folded in my lap, already knowing where this was going. "We've been saving since the girls were born," Mom continued, her eyes drifting to Jessica. "But with the current economy, well, we can only afford to send one of them to college." The pause that followed wasn't really a pause at all. It was just for dramatic effect, like when TV shows pretend there's suspense before announcing the obvious winner. "Jessica will be starting college in 3 years," Dad announced. She's shown remarkable talent in so many areas. It's important we support her potential." Then he turned to me, his expression a mix of dismissal and fake sympathy. "Robin, honey, you're different. You're more suited for practical work. You don't really need college." Grandma Margaret, Dad's mother, nodded enthusiastically. "Jessica is so gifted," she gushed. "Just last week, her dance teacher said she had natural grace. She needs the best education possible." I sat there, feeling smaller with each word. Not talented enough. Not worth investing in. Not special like Jessica. The familiar message, now just officially stamped and sealed. But then something unexpected happened. Grandpa George stood up, his face red with anger. "This is absolutely unfair," he declared. "How dare you write off a 10-year-old child like this?" "George," my father started, but Grandma Eleanor cut him off. "If you won't support both your daughters equally," she said, her voice sharp as ice, "then we'll pay for Robin's college ourselves." I watched as my maternal grandparents stood up together, a united front. "Robin will have her chance at college," Grandma Eleanor announced. "We'll make sure of that." Then they walked out, leaving a stunned silence behind. Later that night, I was heading to the kitchen for water when I heard my parents talking in their bedroom. The heating vent carried their words clearly up to the hallway. "Mother's being ridiculous," Mom was saying. "Robin's not college material, she can barely keep up in regular classes. They should give us that money for Jessica's education instead. It would be wasted on Robin." "She's just not bright enough," Dad agreed. "I don't know why they're pushing this." I stood there in the dark hallway, their words washing over me like a familiar bitter rain. But somehow, it didn't hurt as much as it should have. Maybe because I'd heard it all before, or maybe because I could still hear Grandma Eleanor's fierce promise echoing in my head. The years passed, and Jessica went off to an expensive private college while I finished high school. My parents never missed a chance to brag about their perfect daughter, constantly updating everyone about Jessica's amazing college experience, her excellent grades, and her bright future ahead. I focused on my own studies, spending most of my time at Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George's house. Their quiet support meant more than all my parents' loud praise of Jessica ever could. Then came the day that shattered my parents' perfect vision of their golden child. I was in my senior year when Jessica came home from college, fresh from graduation. I was doing homework at the kitchen table when she burst through the front door, mascara running down her face. "Mom, Dad," she sobbed. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom dropped her coffee mug, dark liquid spreading across the kitchen floor. "Who's the father?" Dad finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. Jessica's next words sent Mom collapsing into a chair. "I don't know for sure." I watched my parents' faces as their perfect world crumbled. But it took them less than 5 minutes to reconstruct it. "Oh, sweetie," Mom rushed to hug Jessica. "It's not your fault. These things happen. We'll help you raise the baby," Dad added quickly. "You'll stay here with us." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you serious?" I said from my spot at the table. "She parties her way through college, gets pregnant, doesn't even know who the father is, and you're still making excuses for her?" "Robin," Mom snapped. "No, listen," I continued, years of frustration finally boiling over. "This is what happens when you spoil someone their entire life. When you never make them face consequences. When you—" "How dare you?" Dad thundered. "Your sister is going through a difficult time, and you're being cruel." Jessica burst into fresh tears, and Mom wrapped her arms around her protectively. "Get out," she screamed at me. "You heartless little—" I didn't wait to hear the rest. I ran upstairs, threw some clothes into a bag, and walked out. Behind me, I could hear them consoling Jessica, telling her everything would be okay, that none of this was her fault. Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George took me in without question. I finished my senior year living with them, focusing on my college applications. My parents didn't call, didn't check on me, didn't even show up at my graduation. But I had my real family there, my grandparents, beaming with pride as I accepted my diploma. That fall, I left for college in another city, my tuition paid by my grandparents, just as they'd promised years ago. I heard through the grapevine that Jessica had given birth to a daughter and was living with our parents. They were probably still making excuses for her, still treating her like their perfect child who could do no wrong. Life had a funny way of working out. While Jessica's brilliant future had crumbled, I was thriving. After graduating college with honors, I landed a job at a top consulting firm in the city. Within 6 years, I had worked my way up to senior consultant, earned respect from my colleagues, and even managed to buy my own apartment. My routine was comfortable, challenging work during the week, weekend brunches with friends, and regular video calls with Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George. They were proud of everything I'd accomplished, and that was all the family validation I needed. Then, on a regular Tuesday morning, my phone rang. I almost dropped my coffee when I saw Mom flash across the screen, a number I hadn't seen in almost a decade. "Robin?" Her voice sounded older, tired. "We need your help." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in my office, still trying to process what she'd told me. Jessica had run away. Again. This time with some guy she'd met at a bar. She'd left behind her 9-year-old daughter, the niece I'd never met. "Please come home," Mom had pleaded. "We need to discuss this in person." That's how I found myself driving back to my childhood home that evening. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling around the windows. Mom and Dad had aged more than I expected, Dad's hair completely gray now, Mom's face lined with worry. They led me to the living room, the same room where they'd once declared I wasn't worth sending to college. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Jessica's been unstable," Dad began, staring at his hands. "She never kept a job for more than a few months. Different men, different apartments, she always ended up back here." Mom wiped her eyes. "We tried to help, paid her debts, watched Lucy while she worked, or said she was working. But last week, she met this man. Said he was taking her to California to become an actress." She laughed bitterly. "She packed a bag and left. Didn't even say goodbye to Lucy." "We're drowning in debt," Dad admitted, his voice cracking. "Credit cards, personal loans, all to keep Jessica afloat. And now?" I waited for the rest, watching them squirm uncomfortably on the couch that had faded from cream to dingy beige. "We want you to take Lucy," Mom finally said. "Adopt her, actually. You're stable, successful, you could give her a good life. We're too old for this. We can't start over with a child." I sat there, stunned. These people who had written me off as worthless, who hadn't even come to my graduation, were now asking me to take responsibility for a child I'd never met. A child they'd helped raise for 9 years while enabling Jessica's chaos. After my parents went to bed that night, I sat in the kitchen with Lucy. She was nothing like I expected, nothing like Jessica. While my sister had been loud and demanding, Lucy was quiet and thoughtful, with serious brown eyes and a gentle smile. "Do you like to read?" I asked, noticing a worn copy of Harry Potter on the kitchen counter. "I love it," she said softly. "But Grandma says I read too much. She says I should do something useful instead." Over cups of hot chocolate, Lucy slowly opened up. She told me about her life with my parents, how Grandma sighed heavily whenever she had to make Lucy dinner, how Grandpa complained about the cost of her school supplies. They didn't hit her or starve her, but their resentment was palpable in every interaction. I spent the next week taking time off work, getting to know my niece. We went for ice cream, visited the local library, and talked about everything and nothing. Lucy was smart, kind, and remarkably resilient despite everything she'd been through. She showed me her straight-A report cards that no one had ever celebrated, her artwork that never made it to the fridge. The decision to adopt her wasn't easy. I had a career, a life I'd built carefully from scratch. But watching Lucy try to make herself smaller, quieter, less troublesome, just as I had at her age, made the choice clear. The legal process was exhausting. For months, I gathered documentation, my financial records, character references, proof of stable employment. Jessica didn't contest the termination of her parental rights, didn't even show up for the hearing. Finally, after what felt like endless paperwork and interviews, I became Lucy's legal guardian. The day we packed up her room at my parents' house, they barely looked up from their TV show. "Don't forget to forward her school records," was all Mom said. Lucy flourished in our new life together. She decorated her room in our apartment with fairy lights and bookshelves, joined the school's debate team, made friends who came over for movie nights and study sessions. We developed our own little rituals: Sunday morning pancakes, evening walks in the park, marathon sessions of board games. Monthly visits to Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George became a highlight for both of us. They doted on Lucy the way loving grandparents should, proudly displaying her artwork and report cards, remembering her favorite foods, listening to her stories with genuine interest. 5 years passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. Lucy turned 14, growing into a confident, compassionate teenager who consistently made the honor roll. My parents never called to check on her, never sent birthday cards, never asked how she was doing. But Lucy didn't seem to mind. She had found her real family. The phone call from my parents came on a Saturday morning. "We'd like you and Lucy to come visit," Mom said, her voice suspiciously cheerful. "We miss her." After 5 years of silence, their sudden interest set off alarm bells, but I decided to go. Lucy deserved to make her own choices about family relationships, and I didn't want to be the one standing in her way. The moment we walked through their front door, I understood why they'd called. Jessica was there, sitting on the couch like she'd never left. "Lucy," she cried, jumping up and rushing toward my niece. "Oh, baby, I've missed you so much." I watched Lucy's face carefully. She stood frozen, emotions flickering across her features: hope, fear, confusion, longing. Jessica wrapped her in a tearful embrace while our parents looked on approvingly. "I've changed," Jessica announced, wiping her eyes. "I've realized what's important. I want my daughter back." The word "back" hit me like a slap. Like Lucy was a borrowed sweater she'd finally decided to reclaim. "I'm living in Phoenix now," Jessica continued. "With Robert. He's got a great job, and we have a beautiful house. Lucy would love it there." "Do you have a job?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Jessica's smile faltered. "Well, not right now. But Robert makes enough for all of us." "And what happens if things don't work out with Robert?" I pressed. "What's your backup plan?" "Why are you being so negative?" Mom snapped. "Your sister is trying to do the right thing." "The right thing?" I laughed incredulously. The right thing would have been not abandoning her daughter for 5 years. The right thing would have been sending birthday cards, making phone calls, showing any interest at all in Lucy's life. "I made mistakes," Jessica wailed. "But she's my daughter." "Stop being selfish, Robin," Dad cut in. "You've done your part, but Lucy needs her real mother now. You can have your own children if you want to play mommy so badly." I stared at them, stunned by their cruelty. These people who had failed not one but 2 daughters, who had enabled Jessica's irresponsibility for decades, who had never once in 5 years asked how Lucy was doing in school or what her interests were, they thought they could just restart the cycle of dysfunction. "Lucy isn't a toy you can pass around," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "She's a person who needs stability and real love, not empty promises." "Where were you when she had nightmares? When she was sick? When she won the school spelling bee? Where were any of you?" "You have no right," Jessica screamed. "She's my child." "A child you abandoned," I shot back. "A child you left with people who resented her existence. A child who deserved better than all of you." Lucy, who had been silent throughout this exchange, suddenly grabbed my hand. "We're leaving," I announced, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "And don't you dare try to contact us." Jessica's call came exactly a week after our confrontation. When I saw her number, I almost didn't answer. But something told me to record the conversation, a habit I'd developed after years of dealing with difficult clients. "Hey sis," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "I've been thinking about our situation, and I think I have a solution that could work for everyone." "What situation?" "Lucy, of course. Look, I know you've gotten attached to her, and I know you make good money at your fancy job. So here's the deal, give me $150,000, and I won't sue for custody." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. "Excuse me?" "It's really a win-win," Jessica continued casually, as if she wasn't trying to sell her own child. "You get to keep Lucy, and I get enough money to start fresh. You can afford it with your salary." "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice shaking. "You're trying to sell your daughter to me?" "Don't be so dramatic. I'm just being practical. You want Lucy, I need money. Simple business transaction. She's your child, Jessica. Not a used car." "Fine," she snapped, her sweet tone vanishing. "Have it your way. I'll sue for custody, and you'll never see her again. How's that for practical?" She hung up, and I sat there, clutching my phone, feeling sick to my stomach. The lawsuit came 3 days later. Jessica's new boyfriend had hired her a slick lawyer who specialized in family court. The initial filing painted Jessica as a reformed mother who had overcome hardship to create a stable home for her daughter, while portraying me as a manipulative aunt who had taken advantage of a temporary situation. In court, Jessica played her role perfectly. Tears streaming down her face, she told the judge about her journey of personal growth and how she'd found stability with her new partner. She claimed I had alienated Lucy from her, that I was using her daughter to prove I was better than my sister. Our parents testified on her behalf, claiming they'd only asked me to take Lucy temporarily while Jessica got back on her feet. Dad even suggested I was emotionally manipulating Lucy to turn her against her mother. I sat there, listening to their lies, watching them spin their web of deception. But I had come prepared. "Your Honor," my lawyer said, "I'd like to submit an audio recording into evidence." Jessica's face went pale as her voice filled the courtroom. "Give me $150,000, and I won't sue for custody. You want Lucy, I need money. Simple business transaction." The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica's lawyer stammered, trying to object, but the damage was done. Our parents sat frozen in their seats, for once without excuses to make for their perfect daughter. Then Lucy stood up. At 14, she seemed suddenly older, more confident than I'd ever seen her. "I want to stay with Robin," she said clearly. "My mother abandoned me. Robin chose me. She's my real family." I watched Jessica's face crumple, not in genuine grief, but in the realization that she'd lost her leverage. Our parents couldn't meet anyone's eyes. And Lucy? Lucy stood tall, finally free of the weight of her mother's shadow. The judge's decision was swift and unequivocal. Not only did I retain full custody of Lucy, but Jessica was barred from any contact with her daughter. The judge called her attempt to sell custody morally reprehensible and a clear indication of unfitness as a parent. I watched Jessica crumble in her seat as the ruling was read. Her boyfriend, who had been sitting in the back of the courtroom, stood up and walked out without a word. Later, I heard he'd left her the same day, disgusted by her attempt to sell her own child. My parents tried to catch us in the courthouse parking lot. "Robin, please," Mom called out. "We can work this out as a family." I turned to face them one last time. "Family? You haven't been family to either of us in years. Lucy deserves better than what you did to me, what you let Jessica do to her." "But where will Jessica go?" Dad demanded. "Robert left her." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Of course. Still worried about Jessica, even now. Some things never change. Jessica moved back in with our parents, exactly where she'd started. The golden child, still being coddled, still being excused, still failing to grow up. But this time, her failures had cost her something irreplaceable. Life went on. Lucy threw herself into her studies with renewed energy, as if the weight of uncertainty had finally lifted from her shoulders. She joined the school's newspaper team, started taking photography classes, and began talking about wanting to study journalism in college. "You know what's funny?" she said one evening as we were making dinner together. "For years, I thought something was wrong with me because my mom kept leaving. But now I realize she was the one with the problem. She never knew how to love anyone but herself." I hugged her tight, amazed by her wisdom. "You're the strongest person I know, kiddo." Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa George remained our constant support system. Sunday dinners at their house became a sacred tradition. They proudly displayed Lucy's photography in their living room, bragged about her achievements to their friends, and saved newspaper clippings of every article she wrote for the school paper. "You two saved each other," Grandma Eleanor told me one day while we watched Lucy showing Grandpa George how to use his new digital camera. "Just like George and I tried to save you." She was right. In trying to give Lucy the childhood I never had, I'd found the family I'd always wanted. Not the one I was born into, but the one we chose together. My parents still send occasional texts about Jessica's latest drama, but I delete them unread. Lucy hasn't heard from her mother since the court case, and she says she prefers it that way. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ashes. Last week, Lucy won first place in a statewide student journalism competition. As I watched her accept her award, I thought about that scared 9-year-old girl I'd met years ago, and the confident teenager she'd become. I thought about cycles broken, wounds healed, and love freely given.